All right, what's going on, everybody? So I just wanted to hop on, go over a couple other topics that are going to come up on the final that we didn't get the chance to go over in class. So, depending on the period, we left off at different points, but generally we were in the classical period, dealing with the western part of the world. So, I think for the most part we covered that Greece was decentralized, city states, and then eventually we saw the Alexander the Great conquests into Eurasia, all the way made his way almost into India, but then that quickly falls. Then we see the emergence here of Rome, and it does initially start as a republic just on the Italian peninsula, but then if you fast forward a couple hundred years, we see the transition into a full-on empire. So it is an imperial power with a centralized government in Rome, and then for the most part, it is maintained by their military. They have a network of roads that allow them to transport their military legions efficiently. In fact, the soldiers actually are the ones that end up building the roads. In addition, we see famous infrastructure projects like the aqueduct shown here, which allows water to flow into their famous cities and allowed them to thrive for some time. But as we transition throughout the Roman period, we see the emergence of Christianity and the switch over from the polytheistic belief to the more now monotheistic, even with the emperors converting, with Constantine converting, and then Theodosius making a proclamation that said that the empire was officially Christian, and that churches were to be built, and Christians were to be protected, which marked a pretty significant shift into how they were initially treated. Early on, they were persecuted by the emperors. But then you do get the split here in Rome. The empire is just far too big to manage at this point. And so the plan is we'll split it up and we'll create another capital in Constantinople over here. And you'll kind of have a dual system of emperors operating just to make it more efficient. But at this point, there had been several 100 years dealing with invasions. You have Germanic tribes coming in and constantly invading into Rome and other areas within the Roman Empire. You have Central Asian tribes like the Huns coming in and invading, so they're constantly getting battered. They don't have the defenses that we do see at Constantinople. And so when you couple that with the fact that there's no clear plan for succession of the emperors, you see a lot of assassinations and a ton of political instability. Inflation's through the roof. There are periods of stability within this decline, and it isn't, one day everything's gone. It's gradual. But when you combine all these factors, invasions, assassinations, instability, economic inflation, we see the Western Empire decline. And so this is where we see that split kind of manifest itself long term. The Byzantines do remain thriving for 1,000 years, and they remain imperial, centralized government, strong military, strong defenses, economic powerhouse, being a center of trade. Whereas in the West, we see different kingdoms splinter off within these kingdoms, within these empires. It's very decentralized. We see the feudal system operate, especially in France, and then later on in England, where you have your kings giving out land to your nobles. They become their vassals, and then those nobles are to acquire knights to protect the land and peasants to operate and work the land. The peasants are really the backbone of the society, the serfs included into that. But they're bound to their land. They've signed the contract, and so they don't really have a lot of freedom to pursue what they choose in life. It is more so you are born a serf, born a peasant, you remain a serf, you remain a peasant. So not a lot of social mobility. Fast forward with Christianity's dominance in the western part of the world, we see the emergence of the Crusades. We see the Crusades called the 11th century. We have the Pope calling from Clermont, and he calls for the knights and kings in the western part of the empire to send help to their brethren in the east, Whether or not he actually cared about protecting his brethren, it's hard to say. It might have been more of a political move, since they were getting encroached by the different Islamic states in the Middle East. But that encroachment had taken Jerusalem, the Holy Land, several hundred years prior. And so at this point, the Pope calls for the Crusades, probably just for the political maneuver, and thus we see several Crusades, the first four being the most significant, where they are on a holy mission to fend off against the Islamic encroachment, and to retake back the Holy Land and set up Crusader states. For the most part, they fail. There are some treaties signed, and at times it's peaceful, there's some exchange, but generally the overarching conclusion to these events leads to, yes, more interaction, more trade, more curiosity, but also there is significant division that is sowed long-term between the Western Christian world and the Middle Eastern Islamic world that will continue and remain for quite some time. In addition, though, to the Crusades, we also see the effect of the Black Death coming from this increased interaction, both land and maritime trade. And we really see, as you look at this map here, you can see that it spreads initially beginning in more so Eastern Europe here, parts of Greece, Sicily, and then it spreads into more of the mainland. And so you can see that progression as the years go by. It spreads further and further inland. And although they did not know it at the time, and they blamed God, they blamed themselves for failing God, the real cause was the bacteria spread through rodents and fleas on those rodents as a result of this increased trade. And the reason why it's so severe this time around is there is just simply more economic interaction, more people, population's higher, more exchange is taking place. And so the plague wreaks havoc, kills about anywhere from a third to a half of Europe's population, and really sets the stage for the decline in feudalism, because there's no longer enough serfs to work the land, and the demand that peasants have for higher wages, and a shift starts to occur where we see nation states begin to develop. We see absolutism eventually emerge, especially in France, like we saw with Louis XIV. But at this point, I'm going to pause it here. I hit on some of the major topics. We discussed the Mongols, and they certainly play a role in leading to this increase in exchange that was taking place leading up to the Black Death. But just to recap everything, the first section here, this is our classical era. And as we transition through the fall of Rome, we enter into what historians will deem the post-classical era, fall of the classical civilizations, and taking us all the way up into what eventually will become the early modern era, where they recover from the Black Death, the Renaissance, the Reformation, and then, as we've seen at the end of the year, the Columbian Exchange begins after the Age of Exploration, which in large part was stemming from all the curiosity that had developed from this increase in exchange. So that's everything I got for you right now. Good luck with studying. If you got any questions, just reach out to me. You can find me in the social studies office at the beginning of the day if you have any questions. All right.